Welcome to the Falling Down audio commentary. We'll be hearing from Michael Douglas, director Joel Schumacher, screenwriter Ebby Rose Smith, editor Paul Hirsch, and more. Director Joel Schumacher.
I think one of the shared human experiences that is universal is a desire, if you drive, to step out of your car and just leave it. There's an extraordinary psychological moment for someone to do that, because the car is very representative of your entire essence, in the sense that you're using it to travel to work, you're using it for pleasure, you're using it to carry your family around. It is like your home. And so to leave your car, and most people have a debt on their car, so to leave your car in a traffic jam on a freeway means you're walking away from the entire life that you knew. Whether you know where it's leading, you don't. But it is a true psychological break that you would leave your automobile on a freeway and just walk out. And then find that you're walking across Los Angeles to see your ex-wife and your child. I mean, there's something about a spiral that would happen from them, because, and it's extremely dangerous for an audience. It's amusing on one hand. It's relatable because everyone's thought of doing it. But it's somewhat dangerous about the person, because the person who's willing to walk out of their car and leave it, the car has a very strange identity to the human being. If you take a hammer and go to hit someone's car, the person will stand in front of the hammer and try to stop you. Now, the car is 1,000 times more fixable than the human body, but people will do that. Even with a used, not terribly, expensive car. And why would someone do that? Because the car is such a representation of self, in a way, I think. And so when you step out of your car and leave it, you're leaving everything behind, in a way. So there's something very dangerous about a person who will do that. Because if they'll do that, what won't they do? And I don't think he knows quite what he's going to do at that point either. But, so the purpose of the scene is to build up a claustrophobia that is so palpable for the audience that they know what it's like to be in that car. The frustration, the heat, the people around him, everything is closing in on him, and it's unbearable for him. The only way he can get oxygen is to get out of that car and leave that car behind. I think we were successful at that, because a lot of people relate to that scene.
Screenwriter Ebby Rose Smith.
Falling Down first came to me through a news item that happened on the LA freeway system, where there was a big rig trucker who suddenly started to ram people and shove them off the road as he was driving. And I just became fascinated with what was the mental process that this guy went through, what made him snap, and how did he end up getting there, crossing this line. And I had a fantasy that here's this guy in a huge truck, very powerful machine, and he's got all these little midgets, driving around him in these cars, and they're getting in his way, and they're cutting him off, and he's not getting where he wants to go on time. And suddenly, he decided, I don't have to take it. I'm in a huge truck. So he snapped, and he started, shoving these people away. That was a fantasy, but the idea fascinated me, that where do you cross the line when all of a sudden the rules don't apply? And that was the origin of it. And then, from there, in building the character, the original scene where he's in the car waiting was actually a fantasy of my own that I had once upon a time when I was sitting in traffic, and I just had this urge to just walk out of the car and walk away from it all. I didn't, because I probably would have gotten in trouble, but that was the origin of it right there, and then I started to build from that.
Officer! The guy walked into the bushes. I figured he was taking a leak, but he never came back. How you doing? You need any help?
Are you the owner of this vehicle, sir?
No, that's not him. I'm telling you, the guy walked into the bushes. He said he was going home. Going home?
Gentlemen, I'm going to have to ask you to both return to your vehicles.
Well, what about the car?
I'm going to radio for a tow truck to have it removed.
Let's just shove it out of the way. We'll get this lane moving,
Sir,
all right?
sir, we're in a dangerous environment here. We got a lot of glass and steel rushing by us at high speeds.
Wait a minute. Prendergast, downtown robbery. Let's go. I'm in linoleum tile myself.
All right. You, back in your vehicle. You push, I'll steer.
When it came time to pick what he was doing for a living, because I didn't have that at the beginning of the film, I came up with that he worked in a defense plant because of reading about defense workers who had been laid off because the United States was downsizing their defense programs because the USSR had recently, gone kaput, and that threat was no longer there. And the irony of that interested me, that here's a guy who was protecting America, who was creating things that protected America, and he was essentially fired for doing too good of a job. Of course, now all that is gone. The world has flipped around. We have a whole different set of rules and fears now. But at the time, there was a stepping back from that, from the paranoia of that, and here's a guy who fell out. Defense is a guy who played by the rules all the time and was punished for it in his mind. And that's essentially where he was coming from.
Wait, Tucker, hello? Hello? Can you help me open it? Yeah. Hello?
Actor Michael Paul Chan.
I think Joel, the reason I got the job, he had mentioned that he had worked on this scene in scene study classes. And everyone who was playing the grocery store owner lacked any kind of aggression. And there needed some kind of underlying aggression to that character, or you wouldn't get the response needed. I think Michael's character would have taken on a different tone if that character was seen as weak and submissive. So there had to be a little bit of aggression there.
What?
85 cents.
I don't understand.
85 cents. 85 cents.
85 cents.
We had to talk through a lot of it because we only had
Give me enough money.
one shot at it, because you saw how he destroyed the grocery store. It would be very difficult to reset after that kind of a scene. So I think at certain angles, we only had one shot at it. So we kind of talked through and figured out what we were going to do with it. And then we just went at it.
Whatever, you come to my country, you take my money, you don't even have the grace to learn how to speak my language? You're Korean. You have any idea how much money my country has given your country? How much? I don't know, but it's gotta be a lot. You can bet on that.
You go now. No trouble.
I stay. What do you think of that? God, where you go? What are you doing?
Michael, he was really good with all the physical stuff. We had to wrestle with this baseball bat, and I guess with all the work he'd done on the streets of San Francisco, he was really, quite coordinated with that kind of stuff. So I was just kind of like hanging on, and he was kind of like, okay, it's your turn to look like you're struggling, I kind of felt it physically. He was kind of helping me through it. I went, okay, very good.
Take your hands away from your counters! Stop it! I speak slowly and distinctly. Take the money!
Ebby Rose Smith.
I thought it was great that Douglas was doing it. It was just great. He brought a gravitas to it, a weight. And I loved the work he did on it. He really elevated the script, probably, sent the budget way up just by his presence. But more than that, it was an element of very interesting choice for this character. You didn't see it coming. That's was the wonderful thing about him in this role. So you didn't see it. You didn't see what was behind the eyes coming at you, and yet, it was there and it came, which I thought was really good for the character. The tendency might have been to hire somebody with crazy eyes, someone you just know right off the bat that they're going to go and do something. But Michael had that calm, there was a calmness to him, and that was really wonderful. There was something even almost a little childlike about his approach to the character, which I thought was wonderful, there was a kind of sort of a pleading quality. And when these things came up against him, it was like he was hurt by it, Why? why is this happening? Why is this coming up against me like this? I don't deserve this. And there was like a real soft element to the guy that I thought played against type, which was really an excellent choice.
50 cents. Sold.
Joel Schumacher.
Michael Douglas had been my producer on Flatliners, and we had been friends before that. We had known each other for a few years, and I knew Michael was the right person for this role, but he had told me that he had promised his wife and his son that he would take a year off because he had done a lot of movies back to back, and he wanted to spend time with his family, and he had promised them he would. So I took advantage of my friendship with Michael, and I drove up to Santa Barbara and talked to him about doing the movie. And fortunately, he not only said yes, but he cut his salary down to very little, because we could have not made the movie because they didn't give us a very high budget to do it. Because it's a risky movie for a studio to make. It isn't the normal Hollywood fare. And we hardly ever changed the script. I mean, it was a first-time writer, Ebby Rose Smith, and he's an actor. And I think that one of the reasons that that movie hit a nerve with me when I read it, with everyone who read it, and all the wonderful cast that came to do it, but ultimately the public and a lot of the press, which was negative and positive. But I think the reason the movie still resonates is because of Ebby Rose Smith's wonderful script. It's very politically incorrect in the sense that, you know, Michael has a problem, which Newsweek, who put it on the cover about the vanishing middle-class white male, got so strongly was, you know, it's about a man who wakes up one morning and the America that he has been sold, that he sold himself, that he doesn't know who he is anymore because he's suddenly in a city where it's a multicultural, multilingual world, and he doesn't fit in his mind, because he's an unbalanced person to begin with, because many people feel, of all races, of all ages, of all color, of all socioeconomic backgrounds and realities, many times in our lifetime we feel we're strangers in a strange land, but we don't wind up pulling guns. And he, to me, always represented the man who does walk into McDonald's and shoots up people. But all the neighbors say he was so nice, he was so quiet. Because it's never really Charles Manson. It's never the monster. It's really the guy next door. It's really the guy in the post office or the guy in the bank. I think it was the shocking thing about Timothy McVeigh is that when the Oklahoma bombings happened, that it was the guy we all know. It's your next door neighbor. It's your sister's boyfriend. It's the guy in the pickup truck at the red light next to you. It was not a foreign terrorist. It wasn't, you know, the movie maniac. It was that guy, that patriot. One of the reasons I wanted Michael Douglas so badly, besides the fact that he's so gifted, is I knew that he wouldn't ask me to make the character more user-friendly. I knew that he wouldn't say, but can't we put in some scenes where this guy, you know, feeds starving dogs or helps a poor old lady across the street or does something, because a lot of male actors would have asked for that. I knew that Michael was fearless. Remember, he had also done, at that time, I mean, he had produced One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. You know, he certainly played a man of ambivalent morals in Fatal Attraction, and in Basic Instinct, certainly a very questionable, you know, character. He'll take roles like that, and I needed that kind of actor. You know, it's a subversive movie on a lot of levels, and I think it appealed to his, you know, his balls. I think Michael's got balls, and I think that it was a gutsy move. And he also didn't hold back. His hair was very long and glamorous, and I think when I said he should have a buzz cut, he said, I haven't had my hair cut like that, Joel, since I was a kid in camp. And I said, then it's time. And I think the minute he did that cut, he started inhabiting that character completely.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Michael Douglas, circa 1993.
Defense is clearly
out of control before the movie starts. It's something I'm surprised the audience has not picked up on more. You've been hearing all this controversy about the social responsibility of this film. This man is nuts. He is out of his mind. Not anybody I know stops his car on a freeway, in a highway, in traffic, and walks away from his car. The writer, Ebby Rose Smith, I think purposely had that opening scene to establish a red light. You know, doo-doo. This man has lost it. And so the movie is actually a spiral decline from that moment. So he is gone when the movie starts, defense, from other extenuating circumstances, some of which we find out, some we will never know. One of the things people are enjoying about this movie is the enjoyment of watching a man not responsible for his actions because he's unable to be responsible for his actions is liberating, and that's freedom. You pay a consequence for that, as we find out in the movie. I think for the normal person, having a sense of guilt is being conscious, is being aware. But guilt is a human feeling. Animals don't have guilt, right? Guilt is something that we have created as human beings. Animals don't know anything about guilt, but it has to do with our brains thinking if we are responsible. Again, defense has no sense of anything except the present moment at this time. He has broken a couple of wires in his head and only deals with what is going on at that moment. So he doesn't have a sense of guilt or really a sense, as he says in the end of the movie, am I the bad guy? He doesn't really have a sense of responsibility. I don't know if people around the world will identify with this character. I didn't even know whether this movie, Phaleeng Dhan, would be a success. I really did not. I think it's a very special film. I think it's the best part that I've had since Wall Street. I think the movie has a lot of food for thought. But I've always been surprised how most of my movies have performed around the world outside of the United States. In almost every case, they perform better outside of the United States than inside. So I think there's a lot of issues from what I see, understand that's going on in Europe. There's a lot of frustrations that people have that I think they can identify with.
My briefcase? I'll get it for you, all right? You can have my briefcase. Here, you want my briefcase? Here's my briefcase!
The reason I decided to do Phaleeng Dhan was because I thought it worked on so many levels. I thought it was an action thriller on one level. In the sense, almost like an old-fashioned Western, you have a bad guy tearing up the town, and will the old sheriff put on his guns and his badge and go find him? And a kind of ticking time bomb, like High Noon, because it all takes place in that 1 8-hour period. I also thought it was a moral tale, a parable about these two men's lives during these 8 hours. So it had that mythic fable feeling to it, which I love in movies. And then, of course, it had the political, social, economic layers all woven through it, with a dark, absurdist comedy, which I think life is really like. You know, I mean, a journalist the other day in New York said to me, I love the humor in this movie. It was so quirky. It was just like real life. And I said, well, if it's like real life, then why is it quirky? Isn't it? Why don't we consider that humor real humor? And so hopefully all of those levels work together, or people can enjoy it on 1 or 2 or 3 or all. I feel that Phaleeng Dhan is imitating the 6 o'clock news. And unfortunately, it's mild because it is one man's deterioration in an 8-hour period. And unfortunately, when you tune on the news, you see many stories of violence. All violence is horrific and is destructive to our society. And I tried to show in Phaleeng Dhan that acting out one's violence, even though it may seem justified in certain situations and even humorous, is not an option. It doesn't work. What I tried most importantly to do was to put a face and a soul into that 6 o'clock news story, where you see always a seemingly ordinary, hardworking family man who snaps right in front of you, and he creates a terrible act of violence against his own family, against his co-workers, against random people in the street. And then you always see the neighbors standing around saying, I don't understand how this happened because he was such a nice guy. And I think at those moments, unlike serial killers, where we look at them and we realize that we're seeing somebody that's so aberrant, so insane, I think when the 6 o'clock news story is about one of those people, those seemingly ordinary people who snaps, that we all look to ourselves and say, that's one of us. That's someone just like you and me who couldn't take it any longer. And that's what I feel Falling Down is really about. Annette Bening, the great American actress, saw it in the daytime. She thinks people should see Falling Down in the daytime too, but she had a very interesting reaction. She walked out into New York, into the street, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And she said that she had 3 very distinct fears that traveled with her down the street. First, she thought, what kind of world am I bringing my child up in? Which I think is a normal reaction from any mother. Then she started noticing the men on the street that she was passing, and she thought, any one of these people could be like the character that Michael Douglas plays in our film. And by the time she reached 6th Avenue, she said that her worst fear was that she knew somewhere inside her that maybe she could become a person like Michael Douglas was in the movie.
I want to let you know that I'm coming home for her birthday.
No, you're not coming here.
Listen, Beth. I gotta see you.
No. No, you listen to me. This is my house now. I pay the rent. I mean, you don't even pay child support. You just can't walk in and out whenever you feel like it.
Don't talk like that, Beth. I have to come home. I have to bring her a present.
You know you can't come here.
Ebby Rose Smith.
Every day in the newspaper I was reading about a gang shooting that went, someone would shoot a gun and the bullet would travel for like 3 or 4 blocks, go through a wall and hit somebody. Maybe they die, maybe they just be wounded. But, I just became, at the point I was just saying, why don't these guys just learn to shoot? Hit their target. So there was like a frustration coming out of that. There's nothing in the film that didn't occur in real life and just around that time, too. And also, I love the idea that these guys come up and they get on his case because he's trespassing and because he's loitering. And in my mind, this is exactly what they have come up against over and over again. Cops, people saying, you're loitering here, get out. You're trespassing, get out of here. They get this all the time. And all of a sudden, here's a white guy who's like in their territory, so they like turn it around. It's a reaction. It's actually a reaction that they're pulling on this guy. And they do not expect him to have a baseball bat. And they do not expect this nerdy-looking white guy to be so aggressive. And that's how he's able to get the drop on them because of that lack of knowledge.
Editor Paul Hirsch.
Michael gets the better of them, and then they come back and try to kill him in a drive-by shooting, in which they fail, and the car crashes. And Michael walks over to the crashed car, takes the guns away from the gang members, and pulls out a gun and shoots the Latino gang member in the leg and walks away. Well, the studio was upset about this. They said, we can't have Michael Douglas, shooting somebody, just gratuitously walk up and shoot him in the leg. We can't have that. So we were asked to change it, and we did. And we removed him shooting the guy in the leg. And we previewed it a second time. Well, it turned out when we looked at the results of the previews that the numbers were exactly identical in all respects except one. And that was when Michael didn't shoot the gang member in the leg, more people, by a significant margin, found the end of the movie to be predictable. And my understanding of that is that by shooting the guy in the leg sort of in the beginning of the movie, you've now said to the audience about this character, he is crazy. He may do anything. He is not bound by the laws of society as you and I understand them. He is liable to do anything at any time. So when he's in a confrontation at the end with Duval and he pulls out a gun, it turns out to be a water pistol. When you've had a shooting at the beginning of the movie, you worry about Duval's life. If you haven't had that moment at the beginning of the movie, then people felt, oh yeah, he was never going to shoot him. He wouldn't do something like that. So We pointed this out to the studio, and they agreed to let us put the scene back. But I think that was key in making the picture work.
Friend of guest. Have a seat. Captain. Did you hear? Drive-by shooting? Disgusting. You know who's gonna have to take the heat again when the shit hits the fan? You're retiring a little early. You won't be getting your full pension. Yes, sir.
My great friend at CAA, Jay Maloney, said, I read a script, and you're going to absolutely love this script. And he actually started telling me about the scene in the Korean grocery store. And I read the script then that Jay gave me, and I wanted it very badly, but the studio did not want me. They wanted some other directors to do it. So I went in, and I sold myself to Terry Semmel, Terry Semmel and Bob Daly were my bosses at Warner's when I did Lost Boys. And they were great, and Terry gave me the meeting, and I ran in, and in the middle of the meeting, he said, okay, you can have it. So it was really great. It's to this day, I don't mind going in and, begging for a movie and not getting it, because there are times when it's worked that I have been able to and it's happened to me with actors where they've been so passionate about a role, so committed, that I've actually changed their mind and given the role to them because their passion was overwhelming. So I'll always be grateful to Terry for letting me come in and beg him and tell him why I should be the one to direct that movie.
Some of these clerks. The file says, we lost a child. Lost it? Lost her. Yes, of course, her. It's rough. Well, it can be. Yes, sir. Still married, though, right? Yes, sir, I am. Huh? It's good. It's good. Yes.
I'm one of its clientele.
Ebby Rose Smith.
When I created this character of Defense, it sort of happened backwards in that, the point that the guy broke is where it started as a script and as an idea, as a concept. So I had to work backwards from there to create the character who drove up to this point and then snapped. Then, once you had that, then it was, a process of just looking at the city and deciding what pissed me off about it and putting this guy through these things and expressing them that way. The thing about the things which annoyed Defense in this movie are they're normal things. Here's a guy who's not annoyed because his wife was killed by someone. He's speaking for every man as he goes through this day, and they're little normal things which annoy people, which come up against him, and which also annoyed me, and that's what I sought out when I thought about the path that he takes. And I got out a map a lot and checked it out and tried to work out this pathway that he took from downtown Los Angeles to Santa Monica, and where he would pop up here and there, and I tried to construct the script around those areas which came up. Los Angeles is a melting pot. It's a place where cultures come up against each other. Moneyed cultures against poor cultures, class, race, they're all living tooth by jowl right next to each other, and they have a tendency to rub up each other at various times. And with the car culture, you're able to go from one segment of this society to another in a flash. Now, a lot of times you're going to miss it because you're in a car. What happens to Defense is he gets out of the car, and all of a sudden, he's confronted with it because he's on the ground. He's moving through it. He's become part of it at that point.
But the judge said we should make an example of him.
I think it worked particularly well in LA because I think, although there certainly is no segregation legally in the United States, there is separation. And you see it the most clearly in Los Angeles when, basically the Hispanic neighborhood is the Hispanic neighborhood. And, South Central is basically African American. And, Santa Monica is a lot of seniors, plus a lot of artists. There's the three Bs, they call it, Brentwood, Beverly Hills, and Bel Air, and we know what that's all about. And it's very much a separate feels like separate cities within the city. It's much more so than in Manhattan, where you feel everybody's crushed together. It's that there's a lack of street traffic here. So things are much more separated than they are in a lot of urban cities. So you don't get everyone mingling with everyone. You know, if you go into the subway in New York, if you are crossing a street in Chicago, right, or London or Paris, you are with every ethnic, socioeconomic, religious, everybody's smashed together. And I think, in a way, you have to get along a little better than when you're separated. And a car culture always separates people a great deal.
Ebby Rose Smith.
I've always thought thematically this film is about where the extraordinary meets the ordinary. And it's a familiar theme in literature and in film. A lot of times it's where the ordinary man meets an extraordinary circumstance and has to deal with it. In this case, it's flipped around. It's where an extraordinary man is meeting up with an ordinary circumstance, which is the climate that he's walking through, the cityscape that he's walking through. And what makes him extraordinary is his fearlessness. He's crossed the line and he no longer fears the consequences of his actions. And I've always thought that, in a way, this is a kind of a superpower that a person could have. A person who's not afraid to die has a superpower, and they're really hard to stop. And that is something that we're experiencing today. And also that's kind of what the theme was of Defense.
Forget it. Okay, just forget it.
I didn't do a lot of research for the character because he's myself, written large, So it was a matter of projecting myself into this position, the position of a person who feels that they've done everything right, and yet they're getting shafted. And add to this a tendency to violence, which is something which he's kept tamped down all of his life, or most of his life. It's only come out dribs and drabs here and there.
I'm not giving you any money. You got a cigarette? I don't smoke. Oh, come on, man. You gotta give me something. Yeah, why don't you try to get a job? Hey, this is my park. I live here. Who the fuck are you walking through my park carrying two bags?
Michael Douglas, circa 1993.
The movie Falling Down affected me in the sense that for the last 3 or 4 years, I have been concerned about the loss of our middle class in our country. The rich were getting richer and the poor were getting poorer. And as a citizen of our country, it was an issue that was making me uncomfortable. Voila, we have this picture that came not only with a wonderful part, but also one of the issues and messages that the picture was dealing with was that discrepancy. But because it was such an active role, you leave your work at night at the studio. There's no baggage because it's like a great exercise. You've had a chance to vocalize. You've had a chance to act out your feelings. It's not like Basic Instinct where you go home at night, all kind of stuffed inside and all, repressed. This is the opposite. This is one of the main reasons why I did this movie, was I was getting very tired and frustrated of playing reactive characters, and I wanted to initiate action. The truth be, the Basic Instinct was one of the most difficult roles that I played because it was all repressed. You were always reacting to what Catherine Trammell, the Sharon Stone character, did. So you had to keep everything inside you all the time. Fatal Attraction was a lot like that. Black Rain was a lot like that. And actually, I went to my agents after Basic Instinct, because, I'm going crazy. I'm gonna hit some. I've got to get out. I've got to do a part where I can initiate some action. And they brought me the script. I sort of gave the example of Robert De Niro in Cape Fear. I said, look, that's a kind of part where you sit there and, push buttons and everybody else has got to react. I said, I'd like to do a part like that. So they said, well, why don't you read this? And at the time, Falling Down had been passed by every studio. I mean, I'm just finding, they didn't tell me this when I was going to do the part. They told me afterwards. Everybody passed on it. And they were thinking about doing the movie as a cable movie for television. But I thought it was such a good script. And it had the action. It had an opportunity to initiate action. And that was the principal reason why I took the role of Defense. To be quite honest, I know this is hard to believe, but I have an ego. I have a big, healthy ego. And in all of the past movies that I had done, which I agree were sort of complementary with other actors, and in many cases, the other actors or actresses had better parts. Because My background as a producer makes me look for the best movie, not the best part. Many actors and actresses only look for their part, look for the best part. I look for the best movie. As a result, pictures like Romancing the Stone, I was a wonderful script. Kathleen Turner had the kind of the part, the arch. Fatal Attraction, it was Glenn Close, had the great colorful part. Meanwhile, I'm in every single scene of the movie, you know, making the movie work. And, you know, Glenn's, and it's wonderful. She gets nominated. Black Rain, there's a little bit more War of the Roses, and certainly with Basic Instinct. So I realized I was starting to become frustrated and said, you know, I'd like some kind of recognition too, not just that these movies are successful, but that I realized sometimes if you're lucky, you find what I call a showy part. Wall Street was a beautiful part. It was, you know, beautifully written. And people, most of the audiences only tend to notice the colorful part. They don't notice the people sometimes who are making the story work, the reality.
Rick, have you ever heard the expression, the customer is always right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, here I am, the customer.
That's not our policy. You have to order something from the lunch menu.
I don't want lunch. I want breakfast.
Yeah, well, hey, I'm really sorry.
Yeah, well, hey, I'm really sorry, too.
When you start using a gun, you know, the reason we don't leave our cars on the freeway, the reason we don't threaten the hamburger place that if we can't get our hamburger, we're going to kill them with a Uzi. If you start threatening with a gun, well, then eventually, will you use it? I mean, if Barbara Hershey, who plays his wife, and the young actress who plays his daughter don't do what he says, will he then, if he's holding them at gunpoint, will he then shoot them if they don't get his hamburger? Are they the next hamburger? So the lawlessness, the vengeance, the frustration that a lot of people refer to in the movie and enjoy or criticize or think is funny, well, where does it lead? The reason we don't do those things is that once you start waving guns around in fast food places because you can't get your food, well, where does it end? I mean, if you don't get your hamburger, will he shoot? Will he shoot Dee Dee Pfeiffer, who's the pretty blonde girl at the counter because she's not getting his breakfast or hamburger when he wants it? It sets up a very dangerous character for an audience because he's reckless and they don't know what he's going to do next. And then violence begets violence in it. You know, he begins with the Korean grocer. And I think that his insults and his aggression with the Korean grocer is representative of his total lack of understanding and frustration of the world he's living in. And one of, I think, the great lines in that scene is when he says to the Korean grocer, who's played by Michael Paul Chen, who has been in a few of my movies, I love him. When he says about, you know, meaning Korea, do you know how much money my country has given your country? And Michael Paul Chen says, how much? And Michael Douglas says, well, I don't know, but it's a lot. All right, well, I think a lot of people who use those arguments don't know the facts. And also, is it this Korean grocer's fault that America's giving Korea money? I mean, it's not. It's really quite bizarre. But yet, these are the small things that happen between people in misunderstandings. And also, there is very dark humor to it, which I love. I mean, I think it's because life is absurd. And his life has become absurd. And he's not a calculated, thought-out villain. I mean, his next stop is sitting on those great steps in downtown LA. And then the two Hispanic gang members come and they want to rob him. And he retaliates. Then they retaliate and decide to kill him in a shooting, but they have an unfortunate accident, and then he takes their weapons. So it's all escalating. You know, it goes from the baseball bat to, you know, the Korean man raises the baseball bat. Michael then uses the baseball bat. Then he's threatened with a knife. Then he uses the baseball bat on the knife. So it all keeps going, and then the gang members have a bag of guns, and then he picks up the bag of guns, and you know, it just keeps growing and growing and growing. So a lot of it, there are so many metaphors, there's so many messages, there's so many jokes, humor to the human condition and to the absurd quality of our own societies, our own nation, maybe all nations. I don't know, I can't speak for them. I can only speak for the United States.
You have a career. It's not easy to see your beauty go and that's all you got.
Well, what about your career?
I'll be okay. You know, even without you.
Sorry to break this up.
What are you doing here?
We got a call.
Watch out, hot plates.
Hey, don't touch my gun.
Fuck you.
You're gonna love this one. Some dickhead walked in the Whammy Burger, pulled out a machine gun because they stopped serving breakfast. And he paid for it and left.
I'm sorry, Prendergast.
He paid for it?
Yeah. Come on, Sandy.
I think I probably used the last part of the movie in terms of coming home. I probably used the number of times I've been away making movies and how happy I was when I was coming home or when it was getting close to the end of a movie. It's lonely making movies sometimes, you know, when you miss your family, and it's an easy emotion to draw upon if you have a family, a wife, and or children.
I never mentioned it.
What?
I love her.
Let's go!
Actor Vondi Curtis Hall.
I met Joel and he talked about what he wanted to do in this character, and we just sort of talked about his idea of who this character was and what was going to be happening. And I thought it was great because, you know, it spoke to some sort of, you know, discontent with regard to redlining, with regard to who gets, you know, the opportunities and who doesn't. And in the climate of the movie, I thought it would be a great sort of piece to drop in there. When Joel and I talked about it, you got a guy who is a, you know, lower middle class guy working every day, trying to raise a family, trying to buy a house, trying to make that next step in quote unquote the American dream, goes to the bank, and they tell him he's not economically viable. The guy's like, I'm working every day, you know. And so what you see is the aftermath of that. You see this guy outside, he's pissed, he's by himself, there's one guy standing in front of the bank, walking around, you know, his own personal protest, you know, not economically viable. This is what they told me, not economically viable. As an individual, I mean, there's nothing more debilitating than to feel that you don't make a difference, that the world is crumbling, that all this stuff is happening, and you can't do anything about it. And so it's an opportunity for him, you know, I'm mad as hell, I'm not gonna take it anymore. It's that point where, you know, you finally had it. And even ultimately, if the world's not gonna change, you're gonna make a statement. You're gonna try and take some of your power back. It's a march of power to me. It's a poignant moment in the movie, I think. I think in that moment, you have to have somebody, there has to be that moment of sort of empathy, that moment of introspection. And I think at that moment, my character just struck a chord with Defense, and he saw the humanity in this man, and maybe the humanity in himself.
Sorry.
Man, we're gonna take off now.
You are? Really?
Well, it doesn't look like your husband's gonna...
Ebby Rose Smith.
It's a dehumanization, is what's happened to this guy. He's in a state, the guy who's holding the sign, and rather than treating him as a human, rather than making that extra step to help this human, he's given this mechanical phrase which defines his situation, not economically viable. It's like a stamp boom that goes on his life, and it's a dehumanizing aspect. Economically viable phrase was something which was written in as we were filming. I mean, it wasn't something that was in the original script. I think we needed to fill a little time, and it was an excellent place for Defense to see a mirror of himself, in a sense.
I think it's out of order.
Yeah, Prendergast.
Hi, it's me.
Hi.
He's eating and resting comfortably now.
Who is?
Mr. Peepers.
Good.
Honey, I'm sorry.
I feel that
I don't know, it's just...
the characters in the movie that Michael encounters were not specifically chosen to in any way criticize or cartoon the people. it could have been, I mean, in a movie like this, it could have gone on for 50 hours, and there could have been all kinds of incidents, you know, in a gas station, and a bus stop, and a train, and, you know, he could have gone on and on. And so I chose, well, the writer actually chose things that we felt were typical to an ordinary day in LA. And I think that they represent frustrations, ordinary frustrations, not complex, unusual, extraordinary ones, but simple, everyday ones that we have to all deal with in a healthy way, and Michael is incapable of dealing with them. I mean, in the Korean grocery store, he could have very easily just paid for the Coca-Cola and walked out. But he can't because his psyche is evaporating. I think that Michael Douglas's character is, in a sense, a dinosaur. Because the fact that he can't deal with the rules, the multicultural society, the injustices and problems of everyday life don't make him right and them wrong. Also, they're not going to change for him, just as they're not going to change for us. Perhaps in the voting booth, our vote counts. But in day-to-day situations, our vote doesn't count. When they tell you that they've stopped serving breakfast at 11:30 and you still want breakfast, your vote doesn't count. Now, it would be nice to pull out a machine gun and get your breakfast. But we don't do that. And the reason we don't do that is because I think that as wish-fulfilling as that moment is in the movie, that you wish when someone tells you no, you could just pull out a gun and get what you want. The reason we don't do it is because, like Michael Douglas in the film, we would cross a line. And once you cross that line, once you pull out a gun and threaten people, the next step would be to use it on someone.
Actor Frederick Forrest.
The beautiful thing about my character was he hated everybody. He just hated everything. And there are people like that in the world, unfortunately. And they are crazy. You know, they are off the wall. They seem harmless. Mr. Schumacher said, I just want you to do it like it's your hero. Your hero comes into the store, and it's the best, greatest day of your life. It's like any time when somebody thinks you're like them, and then when they find out you're not, they turn on you because you're not how they had you figured. And especially if they have you on a pedestal. And so when I say, I'm like you, and he says, you're not like me, he says, I'm an American, you're a sick asshole or something, you know? And from that, we started cooking. It's a very good scene, really wonderful scene, I felt. Michael and I were really cooking together. They let me say everything that was in the dialogue. In fact, I had a complete freedom to draw on my own experiences as well, you know. I said, hold it, Mary. I knew I worked in bars in New York, and the gay guys used to call each other Mary. So I would use things I knew. I had a lot of gay friends growing up with, you know, that love. And I think they thought, oh, my God, there's Freddie up there. You know, in fact, one guy told me, he said, I watched the film for 30 minutes before I realized it was you. So I like it when they don't know you. To me, that's a compliment.
Come on, let's go. Have a nice day, fellas. Y'all come back now, you hear? You got a problem, buddy? Huh? Huh? You got the problem. No, you got the problem, Read the sign. I reserve the right.
To me, one of the most compelling things about Falling Down when I read it was that Ebby Rose Smith, the writer, had created these two characters, Defense, which Michael Douglas plays, and Sergeant Pendergast, which Robert Duvall plays. And they're on this parallel course and do not meet till the last second of the movie. But to me, they were two sides of a coin, or more importantly, two sides of our own psyche, in the sense that Michael Douglas is the part of us that fantasizes about walking out of our car in a traffic jam, about pulling out a gun if you don't get things you want, about righting some wrong on the street because we feel that we are justified. And that Robert Duvall's character, Pendergast, is the side of us that must find compassion, find forgiveness, slog through this life, trying to keep a sense of humor. And that, in a sense, that's what gave the story a mythic, a fable-like quality, and the reason why these two men were in this story together. There's a reason why they're in the story together, and it's not just bad guy, good guy. It's, I think, an examination of our own spirit.
Ebby Rose Smith.
For me, a really interesting part of the film was the mystery aspect of it. That on one level, it was a straight-out mystery, a crime solving, and weaving the elements of Prendergast trying to solve this crime with what was happening was one of the most fascinating things to me about it, and took it away from the pure societal commentary that was going on. The thing about the Prendergast character that I've always loved is he's a cop who can't stop copping. He can't stop. That doesn't work. He's a cop who can't stop being a policeman. He can't stop. He has a mystery and he has to solve it. And it doesn't matter if it's the last day. It doesn't matter if everyone doesn't believe in him. He just can't give it up in a very quiet, focused way. You know, he does rebel against the forces that are coming at him in the police department. Their attitude that he's a coward and his choice of not being on the street. But I think it's more than that. I think it's a deeper thing in his character. Is that he just can't stop. You know, he can't stop a mystery because he is who he is. He's a policeman. So I don't think that his motivation comes from a rebellion against the authority of the police department. It's a motivation that comes from deep within him that is deeper than a rebellion against the forces coming at him. Although I suppose there is a certain aspect of that to it. But more importantly, it's the simple character of the detective who can't stop searching out a crime.
Why'd you do that? There's something I want to show you. Come on, I'm not going to turn you in. I'm your friend. Come on. I don't bring just anybody back here, you know. This is my own private stash.
I think that the turning point in the film is when he does confront the neo-Nazi, because he is so shocked and staggered and repulsed that this neo-Nazi thinks they're the same person, and he needs to erase and obliterate that from his life because it's a mirror image that he can't deal with. But the truth is, when we start being the judge and the jury and deciding who's right, who's wrong, and who we should shoot and who we shouldn't, we are exactly like the Nazi. We just have the conceit to think that our prejudices and our judgments are better than the Nazis. But it's all the same, because it's taking the law into your own hands and deciding who's right and who's wrong.
Huh? Think about it. Here. Why are you showing me this? I'm not. That's just for fun. You can keep that.
LA Times writer Sean Hubler.
The early 90s in LA were a time of adjustment, of intense adjustment. A lot of larger trends were sort of just then beginning to be felt. The Immigration Act of 1965 had changed the nature of immigration into the country and the quantity of immigration. There was a lot more immigration from third world countries. And LA really began to feel the brunt of that in the 80s. By the end of the 80s, immigration had dramatically altered the makeup of the public school system in Los Angeles. There was something like 96 languages being spoken in LA Unified. By 1985, a third of all the immigrants who had been naturalized in this country were naturalized in Los Angeles. There were only one out of every three Californians had been born and raised here, so natives were really feeling crowded out. There were people from 140 different countries were living in Los Angeles by 1990, and certain parts of Southern California had changed entirely. Whole neighborhoods where had once been, fairly stable, settled, middle class neighborhoods, Anglo neighborhoods, now had mini malls that were being bought by foreign-born people with signs that weren't in English. So people who had been born and raised in California, natives, were feeling a little xenophobic because it had happened really pretty quickly. The strife in Central America had amplified Latin immigration here, and that had changed a lot of neighborhoods. So there was a lot of flux demographically, and it happened pretty quickly, and it happened pretty dramatically, and it happened in a way that you could feel it at home in in places where you went to school and where you shopped for groceries and who your neighbors were. So that was one. Immigration was one big trend that was happening. Secondly, Proposition 13, which had been passed in the 70s as a tax relief measure for the middle class, California had managed to kind of ride that out for a lot of years. But the impact of it was really beginning to be felt in the 80s and the early 90s in two ways. One was that revenue was dramatically decreased, was really limited. So there wasn't the money that there had once been for things like public universities and cheap tuition and public schools and roads and public services, of which California had once been really, highly ranked. California had grown used to seeing itself as the place that the envy of the nation when it came to public services. And by the mid '80s, the money for that kind of public wealth was beginning to really get tight. And secondly, Proposition 13 had made property taxes so low that almost overnight the value of a home shot way up because you didn't have to pay these high taxes on it anymore. And so home prices had shot way up in California, and it was becoming much more difficult for working people, middle class people, to afford a home here. Also because of Proposition 13. And even though it had been voted in by Californians, and even though it was a volitional thing, it had been a volitional thing 10, 15 years before, and a lot of people just didn't connect the dots. All they knew was that, oh my God, all of a sudden I can't buy a house. What happened to the UC system? It used to be so easy to get into and great. Why can't my kid get in? So that was the second thing, was Prop 13 and the diminishing of public resources. And then thirdly, there was the recession. There was the end of the Cold War in the late 80s had diminished the demand for a lot of the aerospace workers, and there were layoffs. And although aerospace, now people are used to thinking of it as only one, not that big of a part of the California economy, the economy actually in Los Angeles wasn't as diversified as it is now, and it was felt in a lot of ways. It was felt across the board here, and also the aerospace industry was where a lot of Native Californians had worked. Native Angelenos. It was a white collar employment. It was and even where they assembled the rockets and things. That was blue collar employment. I mean, there were a lot of people who had made their lives, built their lives here on the aerospace industry, and that was really a shock to the system. They were used to getting, I think Joan Didion at the time was calling it a form of welfare. Actually, there were national subsidies that federal money was underwriting a lot of Southern California. When that federal money dried up, that too began to be frustrating to people, and they kind of didn't know what they were going to do for jobs. And aerospace engineers were going back to school. These 55-year-old guys that had middle management jobs at Rockwell or Northrop, wherever, and they going back to school to be high school teachers and standing in line at the unemployment line and for job retraining. Who wants to be retrained when you're 55 years old? They had made a career, and now, and now they were kind of up against a wall. So you wake up one day, if you're these, for a lot of Californians then, in the late 80s and early 90s, a lot of Californians were kind of waking up to say, what happened to the place that I built my life in? My job is gone, my neighborhood has changed, the schools that my kids go to are entirely different. Suddenly their school classmates are speaking other languages. What happened to my golden dream? That was a problem for people, yeah.
Am I succeeding?
No, you're not succeeding. So you just might as well stop it, okay? And you're not scaring me out of my own house. And you're not coming here.
Oh, but I am. Yeah, I'm on my way. You can count on that. Past the point of no return, Beth. The point of no return. It's the point of no return, where it's longer to go back to the beginning than it is to continue. I relate to that, not in terms of how the character Defense says, but he goes on to talk about being on the other side of the moon. And I don't feel like I've gotten that far yet. But sure, most of my life is over. I can relate to that. I wouldn't give anything back. I'm very proud of my resume. I look at my resume. I was really fortunate early in my career with the streets of San Francisco to have the financial security from doing that television show to be very selective about the movie roles that I took. So there was a reason every picture that I became involved with. But I accept I'm beyond the point of no return.
Out of contact. And everybody's just gonna have to wait till I pop out.
Police are here.
Did you know, Beth, that in certain South American countries it's still legal to kill your wife if she insults you?
They're here right now. I'm looking at one right now.
I'll put them on the phone.
I think it may be hard for people to remember, or maybe they were too young, but the temperature in Los Angeles at that time, the riots broke out right in the middle of shooting. The tension, the racial tension in the streets, and the economic tension. Bush Sr. was the president. We were in a recession. There was bad stuff really going down, bad stuff legally. A real fuck you to a lot of people in the United States, especially the ones who couldn't fight for themselves. And I think you could see the anger brewing. And then when the Rodney King verdict went down, we were on all the streets of LA, obviously, making Phaleeng Dhan. And when you make a movie on the streets of any city, you have local police that protect you and help you. And movie police are great. They've seen it all, they've done it all, and they're so helpful. You can't make a movie without them, because you're really in the way of every city when you're making a movie there. They told us weeks before the verdict that if it went down so that the cops got away with it, there was going to be blood in the streets. And all of the black church leaders were begging for, some kind of compassion and something going on, because they said there was going to be blood in the streets. And when that verdict came down, and you saw what happened, and, there was a city in flames, it was, rioting and looting and insanity going on in the city. And we knew it was going to happen. In fact, the cops got us home the minute that verdict went home. We stopped shooting. We were supposed to be in Inglewood, which was right in the heart of where the riots were happening. It would have been very hard to get a movie company out of there. But then, even more insane, we went right back. 2 days later, we went right back on those streets and shot, and people were great to us. Really great. A lot of the people you see in all the scenes in the movie are the people in that neighborhood that we were shooting in at the time, because we didn't want, I didn't want the street scenes to seem inauthentic, so we used a lot of the local people. So we were supposed to be in Inglewood doing the whammy burger scene, but the cops told us not to go there, because they knew what was going to happen if the verdict came in. So we were on the back lot of Warner's doing close-ups of Michael. And then the riots broke out. And of course, everyone on the crew had spouses at work, had children in school, had everything. So they got us out. They told everybody to go home immediately, right? And I raced home over Mulholland and then saw it on TV, because I live in Bel Air. So by the time I got to Bel Air, the city was on fire. And yeah, it was an amazing thing to watch. It was, you could see the hate and the venom and the outrage of, the unfairness of the people who were rioting. You could see the unfairness of their life on the planet and in this city, and how it was all coming out in this moment. Do I think they were all right to do that? No. But do I understand where it came from? Sure. Absolutely.
Paul Hirsch.
Shooting in the streets of LA gave the picture a real sense of immediacy and realism. The LA riots took place, the Rodney King riots took place during the shooting, and it was suggested to Joel that, hey, maybe we should shoot, in some of the burned out buildings. We'd have defense walking past some of the burned out areas, and Joel said, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to take advantage or profit from somebody else's misery. So he decided not to do that. It could be argued that had we done that, it would have been a document of that moment, but he elected not to. But nevertheless, the journey across Los Angeles, from where it begins to where it ends, sort of cuts through and exposes the different sociological strata that make up the city. And one of the extraordinary things about it was how little footage Joel shot. I think of all the pictures I've done, which is, over 30 at this point, I think that was the picture that had the least amount of footage. And I was sort of struck and amazed every day at how little Joel shot and nevertheless got exactly what he needed. It was sort of extraordinary. I likened it to sort of a Zen archer who blindfolds himself and then hits the bullseye. I mean, it was sort of a remarkable, just, usually directors cover themselves very carefully, and I think one of the key scenes in the picture is of Michael making up his mind. The audience realizes that on this journey across Los Angeles, he's sort of decided that he's planning to kill his family. And it's in a moment where they're hiding in a little garden house on a rich man's property, and the helicopters are circling overhead and looking for him. And he's taken a caretaker and his family momentarily hostage. And Michael's sitting on the floor, and the camera pushes on his face, and you realize this is the moment when maybe he's decided to murder his former wife. And Joel only shot one take. I was amazed. I mean, it was a great take, and Michael did it beautifully. But I was just, that was amazing, that he wouldn't go back. Because anything could happen, the negative could tear in developing, or, you know, you always, one of the basic rules is you always cover yourself, just in case. But he didn't, and it worked out. It was bold. He once said to me, I said, Joel, why do you shoot so little? He said, the truth is, I find dailies really boring. Which I thought was wonderfully candid. The other thing is the whole picture takes place in one day. So I'd say, Joel, you wrapped already? He said, well, you know, we're losing the light, so we can't work anymore. So it wasn't as if there were any night scenes. There weren't. And he could only shoot during daylight hours. So, but nevertheless, they shot amazingly little and amazingly fast and got everything they needed.
When you have a movie that the time of the movie is one day, and you take 15 weeks to shoot the film, continuity of the character is very important. So as an actor, I just make a big check about continuity, so that every day when I go to work and I look at my scene, I have to spend extra attention of thinking where I have come from in the movie and where I am going. And I have to sometimes even look at film that might be a scene just before the scene I'm going to shoot that day, which I shot 5 weeks ago. Sometimes I'll go look at that film just to kind of get a sense of the level that you were at. And it was an interesting problem for Phaleeng Down.
Listen, I don't like the looks of this guy. Leave him alone, will you? Listen, what am I paying my fucking dues for? This is my...
I like to take risks as an actor, and I like to push the envelope. And the character Defense in Phaleeng Down, we felt called for a different look than I've had before. But audiences have been very kind in the past to allowing me to take chances. They've been very receptive. But we felt that as a member of the defense industry, as a defense contractor, there was a certain look which certain people in the defense industry don't like because they think it looks too much like a nerd. But, you know, we're making movies here, so the clothes came together, the briefcase and the glasses and the shirt, they all came together. The hair, I knew it was had to be a lot shorter than I usually had my hair, but I wasn't exactly sure what to do. And the first day of filming, I waited that long, and I had the whole costume on, everything except the hair. And the hair designer, and instantaneously, it just sort of got you just up a little bit more, you know, a little sharper, a little military. I just felt it a little clearer. And it's something sometimes as simple as that extra little thing. And I must say, I was fairly comfortable with the part and the character much earlier than most pictures.
And this is his room.
Very neat, tidy lady.
Oh, he cleans his own room.
For me, the success that I have gotten in the business continues to give me more confidence. You know, when you're the son of a famous father, it's more difficult than if you are the daughter of a famous father or the son of a famous mother. When you're the son of in the same sex, you're always open to comparisons. And I think early in my career, I was under a magnifying glass, or at least I felt under a magnifying glass in terms of comparisons to my father, who is unique and fantastic unto himself, and I was reminded of that very often. And I'm, very proud of him. So I think, though, that after Wall Street and receiving the Academy Award for Wall Street, which is an award that's you have a nomination from your acting peers, meant really a lot to me, that I was acknowledged by my fellow actors. And since then, it has given me the confidence to continue to take risks as an actor, to continue to stretch myself as an actor, and sometimes, like Falling Down, fly without a net. Nobody was sure how this movie was really going to be perceived. And I think that's my responsibility as an actor, and with the success I've had, to continue to push myself.
Now, if William, or Bill as I like to call him.
He likes Bill.
Yeah, all right.
I call him Bill, too.
If Bill said he was going home, could he have meant where his wife and child live?
Ex-wife. We shouldn't be in here.
Ex-wife, right, Elizabeth? Now, what's her name again, her maiden name?
No, she was part Italian. You know how it goes with them.
So where's Elizabeth now?
I wouldn't know.
Oh. You mean you don't know where your grandchild lives?
He doesn't want me to know where she is. He blames me for what happened.
What's the word?
He was fired over a month ago. What? Well, where has he been going every day? Where has he been eating his lunch?
This is where it's the only scene we changed in the movie, because the way it was written by Ebby, the only scene we changed the real essence of. He used to jump over that wall, and the plastic surgeon and his wife, who had had lots of plastic surgeries, were giving a huge birthday party for one of their kids. And the whole point of the scene, the way Ebby wrote it, was there were these people who were desperately socially unconscious that represented all of the ridiculousness about plastic surgery and money and the inequity of his life as a defense worker, for thinking he was protecting the country and being a good American, and this man who was doing nose jobs and boob jobs being so rich and having everything. And so he then humiliated this woman in front of her children, in front of everyone, made her strip and show all her surgeries. And it was so, I felt you would have lost any connection with this character at that point, especially that I was in front of their children. And also that we had made the point already. We got it. So that it was time for him to stop punishing people and start dealing with where was this all leading to. So when he realizes that he's holding this very hard-working, basically blue-collar family, he's pointing, guns at these children and at these people.
I lost my job.
He starts to become really introspective for the first time in the film. It starts to get deeper and deeper and darker and darker. And you can tell when he makes his speech that there's going to be murder and suicide. You can sense that that's the moment where things change. And it's because he can't be angry at it can't be these people's fault. He can't blame them for anything. They're not the reason he doesn't have his job. They're not the reason he doesn't understand America anymore. They have done nothing in his mind that would make them candidates for any of his wrath. Because he's from the school where, okay, it's got to be somebody else's fault that his job was taken away from him. It's got to be somebody's fault that his wife left him. It's got to be somebody's fault that he's not making enough money. It's got to be some judge who did this to him so he doesn't have child custody. He's a victim of everything in society in his demented, self-obsessed brain. But when this happens, he starts, I think, to realize that, not yet, not intellectually, but subconsciously, that it's him, that somehow he's going to, something terrible is going to, you've had fun today, Bill, but now where's this leading to? Okay, you had a lot of laughs, didn't you? Well, now what are you going to do?
My wife, hold my hand, talk about grown-up things. I think that a lot of my roles have had anger in them. I think looking back over the War of the Roses and some of the other parts, I'm embarrassed to see the amount of anger that's in all of the roles. And yes, it allows you an emotional release, but I don't know if it's like being on a psychiatric couch, because you really don't have time to understand your anger. You use it for a part, or you use it for a suggestion, and you're following the lines, or the part calls for you to be angry, but I don't think you have time to understand. You only have time to react, but to use what you have, and I have my fair share of anger. That's true.
Have a nice day.
I respect controversy. My film career life has been made up of controversy. I go back to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and the psychiatric community was very upset with us. The China Syndrome, the nuclear energy was very upset. Fatal Attraction, single women were very upset. Wall Street, anybody involved in the banking or investment community was very upset. Black Rain, police officers, and some people accuse us of being racists in Black Rain, although the Japanese nominated the picture for Best Foreign Film. War of the Roses, divorces, you know. So it's been a constant. I take it as a compliment. I take it that the picture is made so well that you have affected somebody. And that's all. That's the only purpose of making a movie, is to emotionally move somebody. I'm not in the business of 2 hours of escape. I'm in the business of making 2 hours of an emotional enjoyment experience. I don't care if you laugh, if you cry, you get angry, you feel romantic, you feel sexy, you feel something. And so I think it's a compliment when there's a reaction. That means that somebody has felt something. Now, if you can do that, and in the case of Phaleeng Down, leave the theater and still have a morsel of thought or controversy, that's healthy.
Michael gets all the credit because, of course, Michael is doing what everybody wants to be doing and deserves all the credit. But Duvall is giving this very understated, and they are the same man. They're both men with, you know, very, very dysfunctional marriages. They both had a daughter. Unfortunately, in Duvall's case, died. So the Tuesday Weld, as his wife, has sort of become his daughter in a sense, because she's so needy. But they're both invisible people in the world. They're not respected. They've worked their whole life. They did everything right up until this day. And they're not respected. They're just those invisible people. One of the most interesting things about Michael's character is people would say, is this a period movie? And I'd say, why? Well, the way Michael's dressed. And I said, that's what makes people like Bill or Defense so angry. Because have you had a check okayed at the supermarket lately? You have an uncle who dresses like this. This is where the guy at, you know, Amco, maybe, who looks at your car would. But that's the way guys dress. They wear white short-sleeve shirts, black pants, and a tie. There's a lot of men in this world that dress like that. But people think it's period if they're dressed like that, because they don't notice people like that. They're invisible people. That can make you very angry, that people think you're invisible.
No answer to ex-wife. You send the cavalry?
Ebby Rose Smith.
Joel's a very strong director. He creates a real happy set. He likes to keep everyone happy and comfortable. But he's the man. He's the man in charge, and there's no mistaking that. One of the first meetings I was supposed to have with him, I overslept and missed it, and I was very embarrassed, and I immediately called him up, and I was kind of nervous, and I laughed, saying, gee, I'm really sorry that this happened. And the voice on the other end of the line said, you think this is funny? And he proceeded right then to just tear me to pieces. I was on the floor in a puddle by the time that he was done, making no mistake that he was the man, and this was the job, and from that point on, I was never late. And so he's a very strong director. He had strong feelings about it. He liked the script a lot, and he respected the script a lot. And I was able to be on the set every day to witness it, to watch it going on, which was a great experience, and I'm always grateful to Joel for letting me do that. A lot of times they, say, okay, it's written now, you can go now, but I was able to be there.
Leave the skin on the chicken, all right?
Okay.
Goodbye.
Shit.
Let's go.
We tried, but could not fit your fucking name on the cake!
Sean Hubler.
Los Angeles is always, in film and in media and into the outside world, it's always one of two things. Los Angeles is either the golden dream that you see on the Rose Parade, or it's the day of the locust and the apocalypse and the Sodom and Gomorrah. and hell in a handbasket, and it goes back and forth. And sometimes the rest of the world just loves us and just can't get enough of how beautiful we are, and our beautiful palm trees, and our beautiful children, and our beautiful celebrities, and then other times they want us to be punished for it, and punished severely. We're living under so much sunshine. No good can come of it. It's too loose here. It's too free here. This much freedom. It can't be good. It doesn't translate to other cities. There's not a comparison. It really is a one-of-a-kind kind of place. And so the rest of the world tends to have a hard time making up its mind whether it's whether it's good to have a city that's this spread out, this free, where people can have this much privacy and not be answerable to their neighbor necessarily, or whether that's a bad thing and can only bring out the worst. Los Angeles shapes the mass media, and the mass media shapes the perception of Los Angeles. People are always shocked when they come to Los Angeles if they haven't been here. It never looks like you expect it to. You show up, you think it's going to be palm trees, and it's going to be Angelina Jolie, and you're going to get to... And then if you go south of the 10, you think it's going to all be colors, and you have to drive and drive and drive and look and look and look for those things, because LA is actually such a private city, so spread out, and it never looks like you think it's going to look on camera. But the fact that the entertainment industry and so much of the media is headquartered here has made LA a muse for the culture, for the mass media, and so you have this actually, truthfully, rather ordinary place in a lot of ways. Collection of neighborhoods, bungalows and rose bushes in the front, and cyclone fences around most of Los Angeles, mini malls. But what you get on camera is beautiful people, fabulous palm trees, red carpet, freeways, gridlock, brush fires, earthquake, traffic. You get people think that LA is this sort of condensed version of all of the dramatic stuff that can happen over a place as enormous as this is. They come here expecting the condensation, and what they really get is like the swap meet. You think you're going to get Neiman's, and you end up with a swap meet. But it's like, but LA is really a creation of the media. There's the media Los Angeles, and then there's the real Los Angeles, which informs it, but isn't quite as dramatic or as poetic ever as it's led, people are led to believe. So, yeah. But LA does buy its own press a lot of times. And you'll find here more than most places, I'm sure you have found here, people are much more inclined to talk a certain way. You whip out a notebook or put a microphone under, they know just what to say. They can speak in sound bites here. They know what to say. That would be the expected thing to say. It may or may not have anything to do with how they're actually feeling. The time that Phaleeng Dhan came out, I remember thinking that it was sort of a checklist of angst of Los Angeles. It was as if somebody had made a list of all the things that were, that were eating at the average native Californian at the time, and then said, "Okay, Michael Douglas, go act this." As a movie, it was, like so many things about Los Angeles, it was both an exaggeration with a grain of truth, with more than a grain of truth about Los Angeles at the time. People weren't necessarily, flipping out, but they were nervous, and they were unsettled, and they weren't sure where the change was leading them, and they weren't sure it was to any place good, that any good could come of it. It certainly wasn't what they'd signed up for. And I guess I remember thinking also that I was a little surprised that the movie had much of a following outside of Los Angeles, because it seemed to me such a particularly California mood.
I missed it. He stole it from me, honey. But you worried that I could take it anymore? Listen, please. You've got to stop this. You're sick. Sick. Was he sick? Take a walk around this town, that's sick.
You ain't kidding.
One of the things I find heartbreaking is he's trying so hard to talk Michael Douglas down at the end of the movie. He gives him every opportunity to just walk away with him, and they'll, you know, that he'll help him, he'll do anything. And then when Michael Douglas realizes who he really is, he chooses this man. Because I think they have such a bond at that moment, he chooses this man to execute him. Because when he dares him to fire and says he has the gun, he knows he has the water pistol for his little girl. So he actually commits suicide. He chooses Robert Duvall to execute him. So I find that all very touching, very moving in a sense, that he chooses it that way. And it's very heartbreaking to Robert Duvall. And then he winds up talking to Michael Douglas's daughter at the end, a man who's lost his own daughter. There's so many things going on in this movie. And when you see at the very end of the movie, when the camera goes back in, and you see the tape, you see there's a very tragic, troubled man on that tape. He isn't just a cute dad with the dog. And we were lucky to get Barbara Hershey, too. I wanted her so badly. She was going off to England to do a movie. We only had 2 weeks. We had to shoot the whole ending of the movie the first day on that abandoned pier. And it's very hard to do the end of a movie first because you don't know where it's going to go. You may need a whole different, ending. But we got lucky.
What can you do? If she's been hit by a drunk driver, but, who do you blame when they just don't wake up? Who?
Take it, sweetheart.
Freeze! You're under arrest! Elizabeth! Elizabeth, get out of here! Go on! Elizabeth! Freeze! Elizabeth! What are we gonna do? I don't know. I don't know what I'm gonna do. Oh, guys like you always say you don't know what you're gonna do until you...
An American critic, Michael Medved, who wrote a book called Hollywood versus the American Way. And his premise is that Hollywood is somehow against the American family and that we're making these terrible, violent, dark movies and there's not enough family entertainment. And there are not enough happy endings. And that we are disturbing the culture. And, I feel quite the opposite. I think that, first of all, there is so much family entertainment in the United States. There is the Disney Channel, the Family Channel. There are reruns of every old 50s family sitcom, night and day. There are tons of products in all the stores, simply because there's a lot of money to be made also on children's entertainment. So I don't think that argument works. But more importantly, I think one of the problems in our culture and why there is so much anger is because in the 30s, during the Depression years, when the Hollywood moguls created the happy ending and sold these dreams across the world of a better life, of idealism, that was then embraced by the advertising world in the 50s on Madison Avenue. And when the happy ending and advertising got married into the TV set, which is the most powerful thing on the planet Earth, these messages of happy endings, of, if you use the right shampoo, you will have sex, and if you use a better shampoo, you'll have better sex. And if you use the right furniture polish, your mother-in-law will decide that her son married the right woman. All these little sound bites and messages that are being given to us all the time have created a culture where we expect a happy life, where we are all descended from people who were lucky to survive. They were lucky to put food on the table and raise their families and somehow get on with it. But we feel that somehow happiness is a birthright and that the country is supposed to educate us and buy us houses and take care of our medical bills and our retirement, and we're all supposed to get golf carts and be happy. And, I think we have too many happy endings. I don't think we should have tragic endings, but I think one of the reasons Falling Down found such a huge audience is because a lot of people are still treating the audience as if they're some children in the Victorian era. Don't tell the Americans there's anger out there that might upset them. They know it. They have it. And so you know, this concept that everything has to be sugar-coated and somehow, you know, don't tell Americans there's violence in America, is a form of denial. And I think that's one of the illnesses. You know, we know it's tough out there.
Ebby Rose Smith.
Falling Down, I think if anything, it's about maybe point of views. That the problem with strife in society happens when you're unable to appreciate the point of view of another person. You're unable to put yourself in their shoes. You lock yourself off away from that. And people start wars over it. I think it's a lot of that. Compromising is the secret to a society. And when people start to shut themselves off from it, then there's only one place that energy can go. It's into a negative space, into a negative area. And it hardens opinion and nothing is done. Nothing is pushed forward. Walls are built up and there's no place for that energy to go but to a bad place.
I think the LA Times did 7, 9 pieces against this movie. They were so outraged by this movie. They actually had someone walk that route across Los Angeles and nothing happened to them. And that was, I loved all that. That was great. That actually made the movie a success. All the outrage. The outrage against, they had defense workers picketing saying they weren't like that. It's a movie. But it did strike all those nerves. There were doors that were closed to me that certainly flew open after Falling Down, and still do. There were a lot of people that looked at me as a much more serious filmmaker. I had made a lot of movies up to that point with very young casts, a lot of them unknown. And even though I'm very proud of those movies and those casts, and even though I think they're about something, a lot of times when you make movies with young people, they're not taken as seriously.
Sergeant just signed us out. All right, let's see. Where you want to go?
You know, there are people that have a lot of respect for the film, and that means a lot to me. But I didn't do it for those reasons. It also made a lot of trouble. It's amazing to be talking about it after so many years, that it still has weight. But I think all of that credit belongs to Ebby Rose Smith. I had one of the greatest casts in the world. They did a brilliant job. All that credit belongs to them. Andrei Barkowiak did a great job shooting it. Phaleeng did a great job bringing Los Angeles to life. She was our production designer. Marlene Stewart was our costume designer. And, you know, even though in a contemporary film those jobs seem invisible, they're there, and they did it, and they did great. But it's Ebby Rose Smith. When he created this character in this movie, it's obviously hit a nerve in him. It hit a nerve in all of us who made it, and it obviously hit a nerve in the audience, and even the people that were outraged by the movie. Well, there's no bigger nerve hitting than outrage. That's what was great about it.